We have with us Dr. Musharraf Hussain, who is the Chief Executive of Academia Institute here in Nottingham. And he's going to talk to us today a bit about how some previous scholars have understood the themes of the Qur'an. Musharraf, welcome. And how can you tell us about how some scholars have divided up the Qur'an's themes?
Yes. Well, the first official classification of the themes is done by somebody called Shah Wali Allah. He died in 1762, and so this was just before the British Raj in India. And he was a very influential scholar, came from a very big scholarly family, and also was part of the Mughal court's scholars as well. So a very prominent person. And he wrote a book in which is actually the principles of interpreting the Qur'an. And in that he talks about the 5 major themes. And according to Shah Wali Allah, the 5 major themes were, one is the polemics. This is looking at the theology and the Qur'an's debates with idolaters, with disbelievers, with the Jews, with the Christians, with the Zoroastrians. So that's a major theme where the Qur'an is having discussions and debates about God. And so that's one. The second is eschatology or resurrection or life after death. Life hereafter is a major theme of the Qur'an. Many surahs are actually just dedicated to the idea of life after death. This was really very significant because the Prophet lived in a city where the Arabs didn't believe in life after death, which is quite strange because both in the East and the West of them, you had the Egyptians who did have an idea of life after death. The Jews had that, the Christians had that idea. So did the Zoroastrians, but these people in the middle had no idea of life. So there's a lot of emphasis on life after death. And the third one is the ahkam or the rulings which help to help the believer in living his life according to God's plan. Rules for worship as well as rules to live in the society, political, economic, social rules and laws. The fourth one is stories. In fact, I've identified something like 124 stories of the prophets. So this is effectively the human history. And I give it the term history of human disobedience. And that's what it seems to be throughout. And I think it echoes what the Bible also mentions about these prophets' stories. And fifth one is God's favors, which is really quite a strange way of looking at things. So Shah Wali Allah regarded this as a major theme, God's gifts, God's favors to humanity. And of course, there are many surahs which, for example, Surah Ar-Rahman is one of the famous ones where you have this refrain in one chapter, short chapter of 4 pages, coming 31 times. The refrain is, which favors and gifts of your God will you deny? Which favors and gifts of your Lord will you deny? It keeps on repeating it 31 times, each time mentioning 2 favors. So gifts seems to be a very big part, and I think there's a very good reason for that, because the believer is somebody who acknowledges and is grateful for gifts. The disbeliever, on the other hand, is somebody who's not acknowledging and is not grateful for them. So that's Shah Wali Allah's take on the content of the Qur'an, the major 5
So
themes.
have other scholars produced different sets of themes, or is Shah Wali Allah's the main way we understand themes of the Qur'an?
Yeah. And then,
for all Muslims?
No, there were many others who did this, but the one who's is an outstanding one from last century is Professor Fazlur Rahman, who's regarded as, in fact, a very major scholar. He was a professor in Chicago University. He's comes from Pakistan, and his book called The Major Themes of the Quran is really fantastic. And in that, he actually talks about 7 themes. And they're slightly different from Shah Wali Allah's. One of them is, of course, God is the major theme. So he uses, and we will perhaps talk about why he uses slightly different words. So God, then man as an individual, man in society, then nature. is his fourth theme. Prophethood, here very similar to Shah Wali Allah's idea of prophets' stories, life hereafter, and Satan and evil. So that is really very similar to the Christian idea of theodicy and also so it's really interesting that here we have 7.
Why does he have 7 instead of 5? And there's different emphases. He had one on man and society. Did I hear it correctly?
That's right, yes.
So why is it so different from
Well, I think
Shah
there's
Wali Allah?
remember, Shah Wali Allah is in the 18th century and Fazlur Rahman is in 20th, nearly 300 years gap there. I think the way we think, the way we use language and our sciences have developed, particularly social sciences, theology had developed, or certainly the language for it had developed. And I think Fazlur Rahman is using a very broader philosophical and sociological perspective, which he was master of. And I think he's used that in order to look at these different themes of the Qur'an. But both scholars reflect their own society, I think. You had a more simpler classification of Shah Wali Allah, the 5. You had slightly complicated one of Fazlur Rahman, where he talks about, man as individual, man in the society, and then, this Satan and evil. I think here he might have been influenced by Christian sort of understanding he had.
Or could you say that in each of these 2 scholars is trying to speak into the context that they're in? For example, with Shah Wali Allah, I had the impression maybe that first theme about polemics is maybe that reflects the environment in which he was working. So they're trying to speak into these.
Yes. I think absolutely, you're right, John. They are really reflecting their own times and the debates going on in their own times, really.